Welcome back to Trauma, Drama, and Life with Ben and Kayla Taylor. So we were able to launch our first episode the other week, and we're super excited to be back this week, just talking a little bit more about our story and kind of everything that's been transpiring and been going on. Was able to get a couple questions off of Instagram as well, so we're going to touch base on, is my wife still trauma bonded, and a couple things like that today. Instagram right now is probably going to be the best place for you to leave comments or questions. I'll probably make a link eventually where you can actually drop different questions for us to be able to answer and talk through, just as we talk about our life and everything that's going on. But we kind of did a little bit of an introduction the last time we were here and we were talking, and I want to kind of do a little bit more, just sharing a little bit more about our story over the past year, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're going to say. Yeah, over the past year.
Covered up until last year.
Really, you coming back and being worried and nervous of, is the change real? Like you were kind of guarded along those lines. And then what do you feel has kind of transpired since then? You're a lot better with time stuff than I am as far as like life and what's transpired.
Yeah, it was actually really funny when we were in counseling the other day. We put a connection that we're coming up on a year mark in October.
Of counseling.
Yeah, of counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been going consistently for a week, and then we switched, I guess it was April, to every other week. So a lot has obviously transpired since then, as far as just the trust level, the aspect of trust and rebuilding that. And
did we talk about counseling the first time on the last one or no?
I don't think so.
Because I figured just since we mentioned it, we might want to bring up just counseling together. Because that's one thing that on my platform I normally specify, don't go to counseling with a narcissist, bad. What was kind of your perspective of when we went to counseling together the first time, which was what, 7 years ago?
Yeah, I don't even remember. Maybe it was 7 years ago.
Oh, no, it was 6.
6.
Probably.
Yeah.
I don't remember. It was a year in, and then
I think it helped. I think it's taken us obviously a really long time, one, to find a counselor that we both connect with, but also that we didn't really know anything about narcissists, like NPD, and we didn't know that you even had that, and so we just figured that it was just our personalities weren't meshing, we weren't doing something right, so we got to know each other through different personalities, and we've done different personality tests throughout our relationship to kind of try to figure out each other and things like that. And I definitely think that those have helped, but it wasn't until really we got with a good counselor. But again, Ben and I did individual counseling by ourselves for a really long time.
Yeah, I feel like I'll put a disclaimer, and then we'll dive into some of the counseling stuff, and that'll probably take up the whole podcast episode than what we're even planning. So it's worked out perfect. Then we have a topic for next week. So what I normally say is if you're with a narcissist or if you're with a toxic person that you're pretty sure is a narcissist, do not go to counseling with them, because you walk into the room and the counselor expects you guys to be on the same page or wanting the same thing, which typically the narcissist will, say or communicate oh yeah, I want the same thing. I want the relationship, or I want this to work, different things like that. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, they'll still continue that abusive behavior. And typically in the counseling section, the therapist back and forth, they'll actually use stuff in that session to be fuel and ammo to abuse you even forward. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I first want to just kind of put out there hey, if you're with a narcissist, don't go to couples counseling. And we're not putting out that hey, we are in couples counseling as oh, try this. No. So first off,
yeah, no. Don't, yeah, because it's not gonna go over well, and it's, if anything, it's going to make you feel like you are, you're the problem, because that's exactly how I felt when we went to counseling the first time, when we found a counselor. And this was after the first time that I found out that, Ben had an affair. Mm-hmm. We found a counselor, and basically
we went to a Christian counselor.
Yeah.
So we went to a counselor that it was at that time it might have been still called nouthetic counseling or something like that. It was very Christian oriented.
And we go to a Christian counselor now. I'm gonna put that out there, but it's
right. But it's completely different.
Yeah. So anyways, but so that counseling session like I would come out of it like, okay, it's me, I'm the problem, like I need to change. Like I think there was at least one point that he said like I didn't force Ben to go out and have an affair, but I also didn't make it easy for him not to either. And so that just like really like hit me to the core, and that stuck with me. So even after I found out like all the rest of the stuff like a couple of years ago, it just my immediate thought was like I wasn't doing something right. Like I don't know what I'm not doing right because I did X, Y, and Z. Like I've been trying, like I've been doing this, I've been doing this, and like still nothing is good enough. And so just throwing that out there, like it doesn't matter Christian counselor or not Christian counselor, like they're for sure gonna like turn the counselor against you and make you look like the bad person.
So I feel like
So,
in counseling, in that one, I was downplaying me,
oh yeah, 100%.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You were downplaying me, and you were saying like, well, this is the reason why I decided to cheat. Like this is the reason why, because Kayla didn't do this or Kayla didn't do that, or like it wasn't necessarily like about you, because at that time like obviously I was like super trauma bonded and we were still newlyweds really.
Yeah. It was
Like
year two.
2 or 3, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was still like, okay, I'm just like trying to be like a good wife to my husband, like okay, whatever he says. So it wasn't like I was coming out and saying like these are his flaws as well. I was just like kind of just taking the brunt of it.
Mhm.
So yeah.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, because I definitely feel like I played it down. I don't think I realized that in the moment at all, but like looking back, and even, I said like, hey, I think I was playing it down, and then you gave more illustrations of it, because even that, that was a long time ago, and I'm a narcissist, so I like erased most of my memory. But like, thinking back on that and like trying to think through, the different stuff, I remember him saying that phrase. I remember him saying the phrase of like, you didn't, what was it? He said it specifically. He said, you didn't cause Ben to sin, but you didn't make it hard for him not to. Like implying that like it was your fault. And part of that, I think on some level there's a logical aspect to that, of like if you're in a relationship and both people are toxic, then one's not helping the other. But I think there's also an aspect that phrase with him being uninformed about narcissism and covert narcissism and reactive abuse and all that kind of stuff, that it really is like a destructive phrase because like yeah, you weren't there communicating in certain aspects because I wasn't creating a safe environment. Like you weren't able to express feelings, or you were shutting down sometimes because that was the only safe thing to do that wouldn't get you yelled at or like me go off about random stupid things. So like in a I guess you could say in a healthy relationship that has communication problems, I could see there being truth to a statement, but like in where we were, like it ended up being like really more detrimental because there wasn't truth to it because he didn't understand the stuff that I was dealing with and that I was playing victim, or that I was playing off of like, oh, I wasn't that bad or I wasn't that awful, or like, I wouldn't have done these things if it wasn't for you, like all that kind of stuff that, thinking back on it was aspects of that whole counseling stuff that pitted him more against you in one sense than at all, than what it should have been at all.
Yeah. So that gives you like an example of why you don't go to the counseling or therapy.
And we went there for how long?
It was like 6 to 9 months.
Okay. I was gonna say, I feel like it was less than 9, but yeah, somewhere around
Yeah,
there.
it was like 6 to 9 months.
And then we left, and then how did we get into that therapy, that counseling?
I think your parents had like recommended a website.
But like, did I contact him? Did you contact him?
I think you did.
Okay.
You contacted him, yeah.
Okay.
And then our first counselor, when we came back, I contacted him, and neither one of us liked him.
The one that was here?
Yes, the first one that we went to.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, same thing. I mean, same thing.
Well, except he was a little worse, yeah.
Yeah, same thing. So like Christian
for another
Christian. Well, I mean, we're on counseling anyway, so we might as well but like Christian counseling. So like specifically like, hey, we're gonna open up the Bible and we're gonna fix you guys. Which like we're both Christian, so it's not like we're like, oh, like anti Bible or anti that. But what we noticed specifically like right off the bat was like, one, he was trying to tell you low key how to parent. That was something that early on,
or both of us, yeah.
Yeah, but like specifically it like resonated with you like the most when he was saying like, no, like this is basically how you have to parent, and you were like, well, I'm not sure I want to parent that way, and because of our childhood and our upbringing, and he was like, well, like, here's the reasons why you should consider, and you should probably consider. And like, I don't remember exactly what he said, but it definitely was like very much low key, like, yeah, you're not doing it right, and you know,
So
maybe you
therefore,
should.
it's almost like he was saying like I was living in sin because I wasn't parenting the way that the way that he wanted me to,
Mm-hmm.
and that just kind of like that's obviously not gonna sit well with me. um, and and plus on top of that, like that had nothing to do with why we were even there. Like that's not
Right, that was on like the intake sheet of like how you parent. Like there was like
right.
a couple questions specific towards like parenting, which I guess maybe they need that to make sure that the kids aren't being brought up in an abusive household. But an abusive person isn't going to be like, yeah, I beat my kids, you know. Like so it's kind of like I don't know. It was kind of stupid,
I don't know.
but
Yeah.
that was like a big thing, and I like saw that. That was I know even now, like looking back, and even then, because that was part of my awareness journey, that was like a hard thing for you to even like work past, you know, because like immediately it's like I just want to shut down and ignore this guy because he's an idiot,
Yeah.
you know.
I think it took everything in me that session to not just like get up and walk out because I was just like internally like dwelling like when he said something like that, and then he just like wanted to move on and like keep talking, and I was just like stuck on that the whole
Which
time.
in those moments, so like in those moments of like me, I don't remember when it was after you came back, we started that one, right?
Yeah, it was like a week or so after.
Okay, because like in those moments of me being more like self-aware, like I started picking up on stuff that I'm like, this is not healthy for me to be in this environment because it's easy to use the words that he's saying to manipulate you. Like, say for instance, with that, like I knew that like if you got up and walked out, then I could totally play the victim and I could totally look like, you know, see what I have to deal with. Like this is, you know, that kind
Yeah.
of a thing. And so like that's again another reason don't go to therapy with a narcissist. But then we were in there and there was a big theme that now looking back I know was missing was the aspect of safety, of being like safe in communicating feelings, emotions, thoughts, desires, like whatever. And I noticed it. I noticed it probably like I don't know how many sessions we did
I
with
think
him.
we
Like,
maybe did like max 5.
okay, so I was gonna say I think I noticed it around like session like 3, where he would say something and it would be like an obvious answer. And I'm trying to think of like a good example that doesn't like botch it. Like I don't know, like he'd be like, we're supposed to be kind to animals, so we wouldn't kick our dog. And in my mind, I might be like, yeah, that makes sense, but I still want to kick my dog. So like, but it wasn't. No, that's not true. I'm just using it as an example. But like in those moments, how he would phrase it would be like this is common sense, so like sin is common sense, so don't sin. And I'm like, okay, like no shit, I shouldn't sin. Okay.
Right.
But like at the end of the day, like that's not going to save me by just being like, okay, don't sin. But there was like stuff that he was saying that was basically geared to like if you don't adhere to this, if you don't live this way, if you don't understand that this is common sense, then you're stupid. And at that point, I'm just kind of like, this isn't a safe environment because I need to be able to open up and say, like, hey, this is something I struggle with without feeling completely like judged or like put down that, this is something I struggle with and this person isn't going to push me down because of the fact that I struggle with it.
Right.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it makes sense. Hopefully they
Well,
understand.
we can't really ask for feedback.
Yeah, I know.
But that was the thing that I noticed in that was like, it wasn't safe for me to reveal more of who I am.
Right. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And so it was just kind of like we both came to like an agreement, and even then like it's not like we were still like on like great terms because I just came back. Like there was still a huge disconnection.
Mm-hmm.
But like the fact that we basically both said like if we are actually going to work at this guy cannot be our counselor. Like
yeah.
And so we had both been doing individual counseling at this Christian counseling place that also like does like other like psychology.
Yeah,
like
I feel like it's like counselors and therapists that the majority of them are also Christian, but I don't even know if all of them at the organization are
Yeah, I don't know.
Christian per se.
Yeah. I know
But,
the
like,
ones that we see are, but
right.
not all of them necessarily could be. But so we basically reached out and talked and figured out who would be best. And
I
then
think your counselor could meet with both of us.
yes,
Mine wouldn't meet with both of
right.
us. She only
But
does
she
individuals.
also she recommended somebody else within the counseling because she just was like, I could do it, but I also don't want to have like this biased like view. So I think having a third party would be helpful.
So we added a third counselor to our repertoire, like current,
Yes.
as far as like we currently see three different counselors,
Yes.
and we've signed different papers in the past
So
of
that
like
they can like
NDAs, so they can all talk
Yeah.
to see if we're all like
And
lying
that
to
was
each
one
other or
thing that
whatever.
and that's what the one thing that we had agreed on is that before we met with our first, like our marriage counselor, they all, like we signed the whatever
Like an
agreement.
NDA or something like that.
Something to where they could all sit down and have a conversation. So they all met before. And so
They did?
I think so. Like they all, like,
I
as
didn't
far
know
as I
that.
knew that they like
No, I feel
talked.
betrayed.
Maybe they didn't.
No, I'm
Maybe
just
they
kidding.
just
I don't
like,
know.
maybe
Then they
like,
might
our
have. I
counselor
don't know.
talked to like yours and then mine, whatever. But I just know that there was like that basis of like he knew a little bit about our story like going in, and so that was helpful because it's not like Ben could go in and like fudge like, oh, I'm not a narcissist, because it's like obviously like his therapist is also like within
Right.
the realm. So I think that that was like very helpful, and so
I think if we would have met with yours, then probably the first two sessions I would have brought mine with me
yeah,
personally, because like I was nervous. I mean, I was nervous of like even talking to the one that we have now, and that was something I think I felt safer when my counselor said like, if you want, I will go with you. Like, to me, it just kind of like, it gave me a little bit more capacity to be like, okay, like this might actually be safe for me to do, because I mean at that time I'm still wanting to, I was still sometimes like running away from my own emotions, from my own self, but then also like exposing that to you
yeah,
and to a whole nother counselor. Bleh, like vulnerability crap, that kind of stuff was
yeah,
like scary. It was like frustrating to be able to engage with.
yeah. And I think for me it was also hard because like obviously there's no trust there. So when there's no trust, like vulnerability is like super hard.
Mm-hmm.
So going into it, we were both hesitant because after just dealing with like another counselor who was like not good, we were just like, what, like is this one gonna be any better, like what's gonna happen?
Right.
And I don't know, it was just after like the first couple of sessions, like laying everything out on the table, I felt like we were both like 1,000% more at peace with like sticking with this counselor and like working through stuff. And then obviously like we started building up trust and like all that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
But to go back to like, don't go to counseling with a narcissist, don't go to therapy, like couples therapy with a narcissist. Like, before all of that, you were in therapy for how long before you went together?
Since March of 2020, so 2.5 years.
Okay. And then I was already
No, wait,
there.
a year and a half. What last year was? This year is 2 years.
I feel like you were in that. I feel like you were in that longer though.
I started March of or February. It was either February or March of
And that's
2020.
why we
But I
have to
did.
write this out, because it's like, yeah. But then, so you'd been in it. You'd been in personal therapy twice as long as I had by the time we went to couples. But we'd been in therapy for a good while, because
You started a year after I did. You started in
right. But I was also
2021.
doing EMDR for a period of time, and then I
Yeah.
was there at the same place too. And you did EMDR before you were there too, right?
Yeah, but I still, that was still in 2020. It was like
Right.
August. You did a little bit of EMDR before I did, and you recommended that I go.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Um,
But either way, like, we were both in therapy for a period of time before we ended up doing like couples. It wasn't like we jumped in that. And I feel like a lot
yeah.
of times with like when I talk to different people, on Zoom, and like work on like coaching different people, like one of the things I run into is like, you'll have the narcissist either tell the other person like, you need to get into therapy, not me, like you need to do it. I don't need to work on myself. Or then the next thing is like, oh, like we need to go to therapy,
Mm-hmm.
which I feel like goes back to a lot of times what I've said of like, the narcissist is always going to say it's your fault. And then they'll switch it around. They say, oh, it's our fault. The only thing that changes is they just drop the Y, but it's still the same package. It's still the same communicated stuff. It's just packaged differently to make you feel better that they're not attacking you when they still are. They're just changing the semantics of it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I think Yeah, because it took a while for us to be able to find, and it took a while for me to find like an individual counselor too. I think the one I'm with was my fourth one that I've been with now for a year and a half.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But yeah, so kind of like summing up some of this as far as like counseling, don't go to counseling with a narcissist, because like it's literally there to be able to get ammunition, would be the best way that I put it. It's like ammunition to be able to control you, to be able to manipulate you, to be able to find things in the wording and the phrasing of what the counselor or the therapist is saying, to be able to come back and be like, see, this was actually your fault. And I think that's one of like the biggest takeaways from anybody going to couples counseling, is you either have like the narcissist like rage out, storm out, flip out, or like,
Yeah.
or they'll just be like, oh, like that makes total sense. I'm a victim here, and here's like the 5 things that you did to me, when they're the ones that actually did it.
Right. Yeah. No, I 100% agree on that.
But yeah. So anyways, that's our episode. So we had an idea and we started it, and it completely changed and morphed. So welcome to the drama part and just our life. But thank you all so much for listening this week with Trauma, Drama, and Life. And we'll be back next week. Y'all have a great day.
Bye, guys.